I see you. You're trying hard to make them notice you, to prove your worth. Maybe you're pouring all your energy into texting, calling, keeping them close. Or maybe you're chasing someone new, someone who doesn't yet realize what you bring to the table. You've been told to keep the conversation going, to always be available, to show them you care. But let me hit you with a truth that flips that entire mindset. The more you try to prove yourself, the more you talk, explain, and show up, the more your value drops. You're not drawing them in. You're feeding their ego. You're giving them control while slowly losing your own power. And what if the person you're trying to reach is already in your life? A partner who seems distant. Someone you've built a connection with, but lately, you feel them slipping away. You think that by reaching out, explaining, or checking in, you'll fix it. But let me ask you, has that ever worked? The more you try to talk your way back in, the more distant they become. Here's the truth. It's not your words that will bring them closer. It's your silence. Most people believe that if they stop talking, they'll lose the person for good. You've been conditioned to think that constant communication makes you more valuable. But here's the harsh reality. The more you explain, the more predictable you become. And the less they value your presence. You're giving them everything, without letting them feel what it's like when you're not around. The key isn't in trying harder. It's in pulling back and letting silence do the work for you. Imagine this. You're chasing someone new, but instead of always reaching out, you let them come to you. Or maybe your partner seems distant, and instead of sending yet another message, you stay silent. What happens? They start to wonder. They start to feel the absence of your attention. And in that silence, their ego starts to crumble, because for the first time, they're not in control. Silence, my friend, is your most powerful weapon. It forces them to reflect, to question why you're not reacting, to feel the shift in energy. There's a quote from the Stoic philosopher Epictetus. Silence is safer than speech. Because when you stop talking, you stop giving them power over you. You take back control. You let them feel the weight of your absence. And that's when they start to realize your worth. Not when you're explaining. Not when you're chasing. Not when you're begging for their attention. So here's my challenge to you. Stop explaining. Stop chasing. Stop talking. Let them sit in that silence. Let them feel the shift. If you're ready to stop feeding their ego with your words, hit the like button right now and drop a comment below. Silence is powerful. But here's the real question. Is silence alone enough? No. And no wise man simply stays silent and waits, hoping they'll take notice. That's not how it works. You're not just going to sit back, hoping they come running to you. Whether you're trying to attract someone new or reignite a fading spark, silence must be used with purpose. It needs to be strategic, so powerful that it speaks louder than words ever could. And that's exactly what we're diving into next. This isn't about playing games. It's not about passive-aggressive tactics. It's about mastering silence with confidence and intention. And we're going to break it all down with 7 timeless Stoic lessons. These aren't just lessons in staying quiet. They'll teach you when and how to use silence to make them notice you in a way that leaves a lasting impression. This video is going to change the way you approach relationships. These Stoic principles will not only make them realize your worth, they'll also elevate your sense of self. You'll learn how silence, when used with purpose, shifts the power dynamic entirely in your favor. So if you're ready to stop chasing and start attracting, hit the like button right now. Because what you're about to learn will open your mind in ways you never expected. Let's break down these Stoic lessons and unlock the true power of silence. Stay tuned, because this is where the real power lies. Number 1. Silence after rejection or disinterest. Let's talk about the first Stoic lesson, silence after rejection or disinterest. This is one of the hardest lessons to master, but it's also one of the most powerful. Think about it. When you feel rejected or sense someone losing interest, what's your first instinct? For most people, it's to act. You want to fix things, explain yourself, or worse, try even harder to win them over. But this is where the mistake happens. Every word you say, every attempt to change their mind, serves only one purpose: feeding their ego. And in doing so, you're lowering your own value. Now, let's break down what really happens when you face rejection or feel someone pulling away. Maybe you've been talking to someone new. At first, everything seemed great. Then suddenly, they're less responsive. Texts take longer, enthusiasm fades, and before you know it, you feel the sting of disinterest. What do most people do next? They panic. They think, maybe I should reach out again. Maybe I should do something to get their attention back. But this, my friend, is the exact moment you need to stop. Because here's the truth: you cannot control others. You can only control how you respond. And when someone pulls away, the worst thing you can do is chase them. Why? Because it sends a clear message. I need your validation. And nothing destroys your power faster than making someone feel like you depend on their approval. Stoicism teaches us that true strength comes from within, not from what others think of us. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. So, what do you do when faced with rejection or disinterest? You stay silent. That's right, you do nothing. No texts. No calls. No long explanations or emotional pleas. You simply pull back. I know, silence can feel like defeat. Like you're giving up or letting them slip away. But here's the truth: silence is the most powerful move you can make. Because when you go silent after rejection, something interesting happens. First, you stop feeding their ego. They expected you to chase. They thought you'd try harder, explain yourself, beg for their attention. But instead, you leave them in a state of uncertainty. And in that silence, the power dynamic shifts. You've taken control without saying a single word. But silence isn't just about making them second-guess their decision. It's about protecting your dignity and self-worth. Stoicism is about emotional resilience, the ability to remain unaffected by external events. When someone rejects you, it's not a reflection of your value. It's simply a reflection of their preferences. And those preferences can change. But by choosing silence, you maintain your composure, your integrity, and your self-respect. You show that your worth isn't defined by whether or not someone chooses you. Imagine this. You've been seeing someone for a while. Things are going great until suddenly they start pulling back. Texts slow down. Conversations feel different. What do most people do? They panic. They send more texts, trying to fix it. They might even ask, "Hey, is everything okay? Did I do something wrong?" It may come from a place of concern, but to the other person, it reads as desperation. And desperation kills attraction. Now, let's look at the Stoic approach. You notice their interest fading. So instead of chasing, you pull back. No explanations. No dramatic gestures. Just silence. That move speaks volumes. It says, "I respect myself enough not to chase someone who isn't interested." It shows that you control your emotions, not them. And here's the thing, when someone pulls away, they're often testing you. They want to see how much power they have over you. How much you'll fight for their attention. But when you respond with silence, you disrupt that power play. You refuse to participate. And suddenly, they start questioning their decision. They start to wonder, did I make the right choice? Why didn't they chase me like everyone else does? And that doubt? It's powerful. Because while everyone else is chasing them, you're standing firm in your silence. You've become the exception. And that confidence, that emotional resilience, is incredibly attractive. It makes them wonder what they're missing. And often, they come back. Now, is silence a guarantee that they'll return? No. But that's not the point. The point is that silence allows you to keep your dignity and power, regardless of what happens next. You're not playing by their rules. You're playing by your own. And that is the essence of Stoic strength. So next time you feel the sting of rejection or disinterest, remember this. Silence is your greatest tool. It doesn't mean you're giving up. It means you're protecting your power, your self-worth, and your emotional resilience. Let them feel your absence. Let them wonder about your silence. And watch how the dynamic shifts in your favor. Because in the end, it's not about making them come back. It's about showing yourself that you don't need to chase anyone to feel whole. That is the real power of silence. Now, say it with me, silence is powerful. And the next time you feel the urge to chase, explain, or fix things, pause. Remember, true strength doesn't come from reacting. It comes from mastering yourself and letting silence do the work. Because silence doesn't just protect your dignity, it amplifies your value. And when they least expect it, when they crave your response, that's when silence speaks the loudest. Let them feel the weight of your absence. And let them realize your worth in that silence. Number 2, let silence speak when they expect a reaction. Let's talk about one of the most powerful moves you can make in any relationship, letting silence speak when they expect a reaction. Imagine this, you're in a conversation with someone. Maybe they say something hurtful. Maybe they're trying to provoke you, to get a rise out of you. They expect a reaction. They want you to defend yourself, apologize, or argue back. But instead, you do nothing. You stay silent. Why is this so powerful? Because people are conditioned to expect a reaction when they push your buttons. They're looking for emotional validation. They want to see that their words affect you, that they have control over your emotions. But when you respond with silence, you take that power away. You show them that you control your emotions, not them. And that silence? It speaks louder than any comeback ever could. It says, "I'm not giving you the satisfaction of seeing me react." Here's a common example. You're in a heated argument, maybe with your partner, maybe with someone you're interested in. They throw out a hurtful comment. Something designed to trigger an emotional response. Most people would react immediately. They'd defend themselves. Or worse, they'd fire back. But instead of getting pulled into the emotional chaos, you choose silence. You pause. You breathe. And you let the moment pass, without saying a word. What happens next? That silence forces them to sit with their own words. It makes them question themselves. It creates discomfort, because they expected you to react. And now, they have to face their own behavior, without your emotional reaction to shield them from it. In that moment of silence, you shift the power dynamic. You show that you're not easily shaken. That you won't be manipulated into reacting emotionally. Silence also creates space for reflection. When you don't respond, it forces the other person to think. They start replaying what they said in their mind. Maybe they realize they were out of line. Maybe they see how hurtful their words were. Or maybe they recognize that their actions were unnecessary. Silence forces them to confront their own behavior. And often, it leads them to reconsider, without you having to say a single word. This is a core principle in Stoicism. Stoicism teaches us to master our reactions. To resist the impulse to respond emotionally. By choosing silence over outbursts, you remain in control. You don't let the situation control you. And this is incredibly powerful, especially in relationships. It shows maturity, strength, and self-respect. So next time someone tries to provoke you, remember this. Silence is your strongest response. When they expect you to lash out. When they expect you to defend yourself. When they expect you to argue. Choose silence instead. Let them wonder. Let them reflect. And let your silence speak for you. That's where your power truly lies. Number 3, use silence to make them miss you. Let's talk about how to use silence to make them miss you. Whether you're just starting to connect with someone or trying to reignite a fading spark, silence, when used strategically, can shift the dynamic entirely. It's the opposite of chasing. It's the opposite of over-communicating. And it creates space for them to realize what your presence actually means. Here's the reality. When you're always available, constantly texting, calling, or showing up, they start to take you for granted. There's no urgency. No need to miss you. They know they can get your attention whenever they want. But when you pull back, when you let silence replace your voice and attention, that's when they start to notice something is different. That's when they feel your absence, and that emptiness is something they can't ignore. Think about a time when you missed someone. It wasn't because they were always in your face, always seeking your attention. It was because they weren't there. Their absence made you reflect on what they brought into your life. And the same principle applies here. Silence gives them the space to feel your absence and wonder why you're not chasing them like everyone else. Let's say you've been talking to someone, but things have started to cool off. Maybe their replies are slower. Maybe the excitement is fading. Most people would panic, texting more, calling more, asking what's wrong. But this is where silence becomes your most powerful tool. Instead of trying harder, you pull back. You stop initiating conversations. You let silence do the talking. At first, it might feel uncomfortable, like you're doing nothing when you should be doing something. But that's the beauty of silence. It's not passive. It's deliberate. You're creating space for them to miss you, to realize that your attention isn't something they can take for granted. Suddenly, they notice something's missing. The texts stop. The calls aren't coming. And that silence? It creates curiosity, longing, tension. Why aren't they reaching out? Did I do something wrong? Have they moved on? These thoughts start to fill the silence you left behind. Silence isn't just about making them miss you, it's about re-establishing your value. When you're always available, you send a message. My time and attention are easy to get. And that lowers your perceived value. But when you become less available, when your presence becomes something they have to earn, they start craving the attention you used to give so freely. And that's when the tables turn. Remember, silence creates tension, and tension creates attraction. In a world where everyone is constantly trying to be heard, the person who knows when to be silent stands out. It's a form of power, control, mystery. It shows that you're not needy, that you don't depend on their attention for validation, that you have the emotional strength to pull back when necessary. In Stoic philosophy, we learn that desire shouldn't drive our actions, self-control should. When you use silence effectively, you show a level of self-control that most people don't have. You prove that you don't need to chase after their attention, because you're confident enough to let them come to you. So next time you feel the need to do something to win them over, remember this. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all. Let silence work its magic. Let them miss you. Let them feel your absence. And in that space, they'll finally realize your true value. Number 4, silence when setting boundaries. Let's talk about one of the most underrated yet powerful tools in relationships, silence when setting boundaries. Setting boundaries is essential for maintaining respect and balance in any relationship, whether it's new or long-term. But here's where most people get it wrong. They over-explain their boundaries. They feel the need to justify, defend, or soften the blow. But true power? It comes when you set your boundary clearly and let silence do the rest. Think about this. You're in a situation where someone is pushing your limits. Maybe they're asking too much of your time, energy, or emotional space. You've already told them where your boundaries are, but they keep testing them. Most people, at this point, feel pressured to explain why they're saying no. They go into long-winded justifications, hoping to make the other person understand. But here's the truth, the more you explain, the weaker your position becomes. A boundary doesn't require an explanation. Why? Because when you explain, you signal that your boundary is negotiable, that there's room for discussion, that, with enough persuasion, you might change your mind. But when you state your boundary firmly, and follow it with silence, you send a clear, unshakable message. This is where I stand. I don't need to justify it. Example. Let's say someone keeps asking you for favors, or they expect more attention than you're able to give. Most people would respond with something like, "I'm really tired. I have so much going on. I wish I could help, but..." Instead, keep it simple. "I'm not available for that." Then silence. No further explanation. No justification. Just silence. Why this works? That silence reinforces your boundary. It shows confidence in your decision. It leaves no room for negotiation. The other person will feel the weight of that silence and be forced to respect your boundary. At first, it might feel uncomfortable, especially if you're used to explaining yourself or trying to make others feel better about your choices. But in reality, this silence is a sign of self-respect and emotional maturity. Silence also gives them time to process. If you flood the conversation with explanations, they focus on your reasons, looking for loopholes to convince you to change your mind. But when you remain silent, they're left to reflect on the boundary itself. There's nothing to argue against, nothing to negotiate. Just your decision, standing firm. A core lesson in Stoicism. Stoic philosophy teaches us that maintaining control over our responses is the key to preserving inner peace. Silence, in this case, isn't about shutting down, it's about standing firm. You're not seeking approval. You're not trying to persuade them. You're simply holding your ground. So next time you set a boundary, state it clearly. Then let silence do the rest. Let them feel the firmness of your stance. Let them recognize the strength of your self-respect. Because in this moment, silence is your greatest ally. Number 5. Silence as a tool of mystery. Silence is one of the most powerful tools for creating mystery in a relationship. People are naturally drawn to what they don't fully understand, and silence cultivates that intrigue. When you use silence strategically, you're not just withholding words. You're creating an air of unpredictability that keeps them wanting more. Think about the early stages of getting to know someone. If you constantly share every detail about your life, if you tell them everything you think, feel, and plan, you leave nothing to the imagination. The excitement fades, because there's no curiosity left. When you're too open, too soon, you lose the element of surprise. But when you hold back, when you allow silence to fill certain moments, it leaves them wondering about you. They start to think about your thoughts, your feelings, your next move. This isn't about playing games, it's about keeping some things for yourself. Silence creates gaps that make them curious to learn more. They start asking themselves questions like, why haven't they mentioned that? What are they thinking? What's next? And that intrigue keeps them invested. You become someone they can't fully figure out, and that's captivating. Another way silence creates mystery? Not always being available. when you're not constantly responding right away, when you leave some conversations hanging. It makes them think. It gives them space to wonder, to anticipate your next move. And that anticipation creates tension that fuels attraction. Stoicism teaches us to be deliberate with our actions and words. Sometimes, saying less is more powerful than filling every moment with chatter. By holding back, you control what others know about you, and you leave them wanting more. So the next time you feel the urge to explain everything, pause. Remember, mystery is magnetic. Let your silence speak for itself. And watch how it draws them closer, keeping them curious and engaged. Number 6. Use silence to break patterns. Let's talk about one of the most underrated yet powerful ways to shift the dynamics in a relationship: using silence to break patterns. Relationships, whether new or long-term, often fall into predictable cycles. The same arguments, the same emotional reactions, the same routines over and over again. And when a relationship gets stuck in these patterns, it becomes stagnant, sometimes even toxic. That's where the power of silence comes in. It can disrupt these cycles and completely reset the energy between you and the other person. Picture this. You're in a relationship, and every time a disagreement comes up, the same argument unfolds. Maybe they criticize something, and you immediately get defensive. Or maybe you're always the one apologizing, trying to fix things, even when it's not your fault. You both know exactly how it's going to play out. And every time, it leaves you frustrated, drained, and resentful. This cycle is toxic. And every time you react the same way, you're reinforcing it. But what if you did something different? What if, instead of reacting, you stayed silent? In Stoic philosophy, one of the greatest lessons is about mastering your reactions. When you refuse to react the way they expect, you instantly break the cycle. If they're used to you always defending yourself or escalating the argument, your silence will throw them off balance. It forces them to pause, to question the familiar pattern. And often, it stops the argument in its tracks. Silence in this moment becomes a tool of control. Not in a manipulative way, but in a way that protects your peace. That prevents the situation from spiraling out of control. By choosing silence, you're not avoiding the issue. You're giving it space. Space to cool down. Space for reflection. And space to prevent the conversation from becoming destructive. When you stay silent instead of reacting, it forces the other person to face their own behavior without your emotional involvement. They're no longer fueled by your reaction. Instead, they're left alone with their words, forced to reflect. And more often than not, that reflection leads to change. Silence can also break patterns in daily communication. If you're always the one initiating conversations, if you're always the one keeping things going, if you're always the one providing emotional support, it creates imbalance. And over time, that imbalance can turn into resentment. By pulling back and allowing silence to settle in, you force the other person to step up and meet you halfway. They start to notice your absence. They start to realize when you're no longer the one doing all the work. And that shift, it can rebalance the dynamic, creating a healthier, more equal relationship. Breaking patterns with silence doesn't mean avoiding communication. It doesn't mean ignoring problems. It means stepping back to disrupt unhealthy cycles, so that both of you have the chance to reflect and reset. The tension created by silence isn't negative, it's productive. It stops habitual reactions and opens the door to healthier communication. So next time you feel stuck in a toxic loop, or find yourself caught in yet another heated argument, try something different. Use silence to break the pattern, to create space for reflection, to regain control over your emotional responses. Because sometimes, silence is the reset button that shifts a relationship from conflict and imbalance to peace and understanding. Number 7. The silence of emotional control. Let's talk about the silence of emotional control, one of the most powerful tools you can develop in any relationship. Emotional control is the cornerstone of Stoic philosophy. It's what separates those who are reactive from those who command respect. The person who masters their emotions, who remains calm, composed, and silent in the face of chaos, holds the real power. Imagine this. You're in the middle of a heated situation. Maybe your partner, or someone you're interested in, says something hurtful. Maybe they challenge you, trying to provoke an emotional reaction. Most people, in this moment, react immediately. They lash out. They defend themselves. They try to win the argument. But that's exactly what the other person expects. And when you react impulsively, you're handing over control of your emotions to them. Now picture the opposite. You stay silent. You don't react. You don't immediately jump in to defend yourself or argue. Instead, you take a breath and let the moment pass without a word. That silence shows emotional control. It proves that you're not easily shaken, that you're not ruled by emotions, that you can maintain composure even in intense situations. And that silence, it sends a powerful message. You can't be shaken. When you master emotional control through silence, you create an environment where they can no longer manipulate or control you. Without your emotional reaction fueling the fire, they're forced to confront their own behavior. Silence isn't about avoiding the issue. It's about maintaining your power. It's about refusing to let the situation dictate your actions. One of the core teachings of Stoicism is this: you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Marcus Aurelius. This is what emotional control through silence offers. You're not trying to control the other person, but you are controlling how you respond to them. And in relationships, this level of control is magnetic because it shows confidence and self-respect. When you don't react to provocation, when you hold your ground in silence, it forces them to realize they don't have power over you. And for someone used to provoking emotional reactions in others, that can be incredibly unsettling. It also sets a boundary. It communicates. I won't be dragged into emotional games. I won't let anyone dictate how I feel. The silence of emotional control also gives you time to think. Instead of reacting impulsively, you reflect. You assess whether the issue is even worth addressing, or if silence is the best course of action. This calm, measured approach keeps you in control. Not just of your emotions, but of the entire relationship dynamic. In the end, the silence of emotional control isn't about avoiding communication. It's about proving that you're in charge of your own emotional state. That no one can pull you into a reaction unless you allow it. This kind of control? It's deeply attractive because it signals maturity, strength, and stability. And those are the qualities that build strong, healthy relationships. So next time you feel the urge to react emotionally, pause. Choose silence. Because silence isn't weakness. It's the ultimate display of strength and emotional mastery. Silence isn't just the absence of words. It's a powerful tool, one that can shift the dynamics of any relationship. It's time to stop reacting and start using silence strategically. To communicate strength. To create mystery. To master emotional control. If you're ready to take control of your relationships, hit the like button and drop a comment below with the phrase, "I am silent strength." Affirm your commitment to mastering this powerful tool. Let's own our power together.